final two speakers sort of really just take us back to the advertising industry, really as we started. Good old-fashioned creativity. I suspect that if some of these people at the EU that wanted to ban TV ads had actually seen the work of our next two speakers, they would have been positive fans of some of the work that these guys have been responsible for over the years. In fact, to many people, some of the TV ads that Chuck Porter and Sir John Hegarty have worked on have actually been better than many of the programs. These guys have been some of the sort of founding fathers of great creative work. And we thought that it would be great to end our first day hearing what they have to say about the changes that are occurring in the new media economy, many of the themes that we've talked about today, and ask for their views on how they see the industry moving on. So without further ado, I'd like to invite our first speaker for the final session of today, and that is Chuck Porter, who is the head of Crispin, Porter, Bogusky. Ladies and gentlemen, Chuck Porter.
Hi. How are you? Thanks for having me. You know, something just occurred to me just now as I was walking up here. Now, I promise I'm not going to do a PowerPoint where I read every word, because you've seen a few of those, and I'm not going to do a thing where I put like a whole bunch of type on the screen. This is what was written about that I was going to talk about. I think instead I'll talk about something I actually know about, and maybe what I'll talk about a little bit is why this is sort of not something that in our agency we think about very much at all. So imagine you're a 15-year-old kid and you go to the movies on Friday night or Saturday afternoon, and this is what you see. So that's a commercial that we did a long time ago, probably about 8 years ago, for a brand we created in the US called Truth, which was a sort of an anti-teen smoking brand. And what I really want to talk about today is a little bit which comes first, the media or the egg, a little bit about does media dictate the idea or does the idea dictate the media, but really not very much about that, because it's not what we sort of think about most of the time. What we think about most of the time, and I think what we learn from commercials like this, is first of all, popular culture is currency, and secondly, and I think more importantly, the power of the story. And I think when it comes to the discussion about does media lead or does creative lead, the reality is whoever has the best ideas should lead. And I think that there's conversation going on right now that probably is not very useful. It's maybe fun, but I don't think it's very real. And I've talked about this before, and if you've seen this, forgive me, but I think that that the first myth that I hear people talking about a lot is that everything has changed. And this has to do with technology. I believe that it comes, or at least certainly in the US, and I think pretty much around the world, it was precipitated by the crash of '04, when all of a sudden in the US, during one TV season, young men viewing of broadcast TV dropped like a brick. It went down something like 20 or 25%. And that's when everybody became hysterical, and that's when everybody was talking about, oh, okay, this is the death of the TV spot, and it became conventional wisdom, and Mike Gardner is like, you think the TV spot is dead? And I guarantee you that there's a book being written right now, and articles being written, seminars being had about, okay, everything has changed. I think the reality is probably the smartest thing that I have read about the current state of marketing communications came before this. It was written roughly in 380 BC It's from Plato, who I think was the first really great media guy. And what he said was, there is no learning without emotion. And I think that in terms of what we all are supposed to be doing, which is marketing communications, this is probably as relevant a thing to think about as anything. The fact is, people learn from stories. They learn from parables and from fables. That's what people remember. And sometimes they learn from advertising if the story is good enough. So realizing that, I want to talk about just a few useful rules, and I don't even want to call them rules, a few useful ideas that we have used to maybe try and tell better stories. And I'm gonna show some examples here, because otherwise I'm just talking about advertising theory, and I can't think of anything more boring than advertising theory. So I'm going to show some examples, and I'm using a lot of our work. There are a lot of agencies, including John's agency, that are doing, I think, a lot of really brilliant stuff. I'm using examples of our work because it's like across the hall. It's easy for me to get. I think the first thing that we believe, and that's relevant to media, is stay loose and back winners. I think that flexibility in both creative platforms and media plans is becoming more and more and more important. We rarely will put together an in-stone, year-long media plan or even 6-month-long media plan, because we believe in backing ideas that get the juice. We did a thing several years ago, I guess about 3.5 years ago, for a client of ours called Burger King, which was for chicken sandwiches. And with this chicken, maybe you've seen it, it was called the Subservient Chicken. We thought it was a little idea and sort of cute. What happened was, this is a chicken and you could go online and make it do things. It got 100 million hits in the first 12 days. It sort of went crazy. So what we did is get behind it, and we did a bunch of TV that we weren't planning on doing, but when we realized that there must be something about this weirdly dressed guy in a chicken outfit that people liked, we tried very, very hard to capitalize on that. And I think we learned the lesson then very strongly of the importance of flexibility. I think the other lesson we learned is the globalness or globality, or it came home to us, of the internet, because this particular thing became almost iconic in very diverse markets, in Brazil, in Japan, in Spain, and it became very viral, and I think no one could have predicted it, and it's very hard to measure it. But it is, even now in Spain, for example, it's become an icon of the brand, and so we use it. And I want to show you a couple of spots we just broke about 3 weeks ago for Burger King in Spain using this sort of weird chicken.
Pollo. Un poco dulce. Un poco no tan dulce. El nuevo Tender Crisp con salsa de mostaza y miel de Burger King. Carne 100% pechuga de pollo. Pollo. Un poco dulce. Un poco no tan dulce. El nuevo Tender Crisp con salsa de mostaza y miel de Burger King. Carne 100% pechuga de pollo.
Another example of this work is a piece that we did for Volkswagen when we were introducing the new model of the Jetta into the U.S. This is the spot that we did, and a lot of people hated it, but a lot of people loved it, and I'll show you what we did afterwards.
Just gives me the feeling like she's not, like, listening to me.
Have you tried not saying like every other word?
What?
Remember your ski trip story?
Yeah.
I was, like, going down the hill, and, like, this guy, like, cut me off, and, like, there was a crowd,
No,
and, like,
come on, that's
and I
not
was like,
me.
look, stuff either happens or it doesn't happen. Stuff doesn't sort of like happen.
Holy.
So obviously that's about safety, and the market that we were talking to, it seemed to resonate, I guess literally with them. So we created this website that if you went on the website, when you configured your Jetta and picked a color and stuff like that, after you did all that, you could decide what you wanted to crash it into. And you had 14 different things. These were two of the most popular. hard to get a car company to show a broken car. I think that there's another myth that's sort of going around right now, and I think it's been brought about by a couple of things, both of them related to technology. When a survey was done asking people what kinds of technology really changed their life most dramatically, it was sort of interesting because TiVo or video recording, whatever the format is, more than half the people said it changed their life dramatically, which scares TV broadcasters, obviously. And the other thing is multitasking. When a survey was done pretty recently about multitasking, more than 70% of the people say that when they're watching TV or when they're online, they're doing something else as well. So I think that these two things have both sort of led up to this myth that the customer is in control, that all of a sudden things have changed and the customers... I really don't understand when the customer wasn't in control. I don't remember a time when we could make an audience watch TV spots or read magazine ads. It must have been a wonderful time. I wasn't around then. I think what technology has really done is it's really enabled people, it's made it much, much easier for people to ignore you. Because they can multitask or they can TiVo you, so it's much easier for them to ignore you. And I think what that says to us is that interrupting people is not such a good marketing plan anymore. But I think the other side of that coin is that technology has made it much easier for people to fall in love with you because they can go online and they can get involved with your brand more rapidly and more richly than they ever could before. And that's a trade-off that we will take because I think it's a trade-off that favors storytellers. We did this little thing for Burger King when they did a promotion with The Simpsons, and it was a website where you could go and get Simpsonized. What happened was you sent in a picture of yourself, and it came out the other end Simpsonized. Astonishingly enough, to me, 27 people have gone to this site. But I think it's an example that people can get involved very quick and in a very deep way. I think another thing that we've learned, there's been all kinds of conversation about branded content. Probably there have been 1,000 seminars about branded content. What we've learned is that you can't abuse branded content. Sir John's agency has done some of the coolest branded content I think that there is out there. But I think the most important thing to remember is the two things about branded content are this. Number one, it's got to relate in some way to your brand as opposed to just product placement. And number two, the audience knows you're doing it. I mean, they're pretty smart, and you can't pull one over on them. So I want to show you a little piece from a TV show in the U.S. called 30 Rock that I think is a great example of a smart way to use branded content.
I'm sorry, you're saying you want us to use the show to sell stuff?
Look, I know how this sounds.
No, come on, Jack, we're not doing that. We're not compromising the integrity of the show to sell...
Wow, this is Diet Snapple?
I know, it tastes just like regular Snapple, doesn't it?
You should try Plumogranate. It's amazing.
I only date guys who drink Snapple.